Hello, I'm going to show you how I made a map of missing sidewalks in Bloomington, Indiana. I recently conducted a sidewalk equity audit for Bloomington, Indiana. I wanted to look at how fairly sidewalks had been distributed in Bloomington with regard to race and income. And to do that, to understand where sidewalks possibly should be, it seemed pretty valuable to know where in fact around town sidewalks were missing. And so here's how I did that using publicly available data sets. Bloomington, Indiana has an open data portal, and two data sets I used from that, which I found were a map of the center lines of city maintained roads in Bloomington, Indiana, and a second data set that was all of the sidewalks in Bloomington, Indiana. So I sort of wanted to find the opposite, not where the sidewalks were, but where the sidewalks weren't. And here's how I did that using the QGIS software, which is free and open source software. So I'm skipping a part in this which I had trouble getting the data in the right format. The open data portal for Bloomington offered the data in a kind of GeoJSON, but it wasn't the spec compliant one, so I had to change the datum to be the WSG84 datum. So we're starting from that point where I have some valid GeoJSON to work with. So here we have the QGIS software open, which is freely available for Mac, Windows, and Linux, and I'm going to create a new project. It looks like I've already done that step. So the next is I go to layers and add layer, and I want to add vector layer. And the first file it wants to open is the current sidewalks. That's already selected, so I just say add. Great. I'm going to repeat that step. Layer, add vector layer. And this time I'm going to select the center lines, the one that has the city roads in it. Great. And then over here I have my layer selection. So that's the sidewalk layer, I think. No. Let's see, that's the sidewalk layer. There we have the center line layer. That's a pretty hard color to read. Deal with that. So I want to pause here for a minute. For what comes next is I need to do some unit conversion, and I want the mapping software works in the unit of degrees, but I want to think in terms of feet. And so I needed to figure out how to convert degrees to feet. And the way I started with that is starting with the coordinates of Bloomington, which are roughly a longitude of -86 and change, and a latitude of positive 39 and change. I found a website where I can convert latitude to feet, and depending on your latitude, the calculation of degrees to feet is different. So I put in the latitude of Bloomington, and I got back out this number down here, which is the number of feet and length of a degree of latitude in feet. So I'll use that in the next step. So I calculated that, wrote that down. I can put a link to that site in the notes. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the map of all the roads in Bloomington, all the streets, and then I'm subtracting from that the streets that have sidewalks. And the result is the map of streets that don't have sidewalks. The challenge is that I don't have a map of roads with sidewalks. I have a map of the sidewalks themselves. So to solve this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the shape of the sidewalks, the map of the sidewalks, and I'm going to buffer it out. So I'm going to make the map of the sidewalks I have. I'm going to widen the sidewalks essentially to be about 50 feet in any direction, so that they're wider than the road. And that's what that previous calculation was for. And it's okay if this doesn't match real life, because this is just a tool, and this layer eventually gets removed and thrown away in the next step. So here we go, moving on. Okay, what's my next step? All right, so my next step is I go back to the vector menu to Geoprocessing Tools and Buffer. So I'm going to do that now. Vector. If you think it's small for you to see, it's small for me to see too. Vector, Geoprocessing Tools, and Buffer. And Buffer asks me which layer I want to buffer, and I want to buffer the sidewalk layer. And then it asks me about that. It's asking me for the number of feet, or actually no, it's actually asking me for degrees. Let's see if I can paste it in there. And that looks perfect. So I say run. All right. So I'm going to close the other ones. So we created a new layer called buffered. So this is a sidewalk layer, and now it's been buffered out. And we're moving right along. Now I want to subtract, the technical term in the GIS software is difference. I'm going to use the difference between the road layer and this buffered sidewalk layer. So I'm going to go back to the menu vector, Geoprocessing Tools, and now I'm going to difference. In the input layer is the center lines, and the overlay layer is buffered, and it's going to automatically put the difference on a new layer. I think I have to go into this little optional place and say ignore errors, so I'm going to go ahead and do that for both layers. So now I'm ignoring those errors. So here we go, I'm running, and it's really surprising, just taking a second. It's already about 50% of the way done. It says it's done. Cool. So now it has a new layer called difference. And you can't see it there, but I mean, the lines are faint. But this might be your final product that you would then save and export and put back in whatever GIS software you want. What I actually did, because I didn't know at the time how to change the display of the lines in my other mapping software, is I went ahead and buffered the result out so I would have something bolder to display on a map. So that, not necessarily what you want to do in your case, but I'm going to go ahead and take this one called buffer. This layer is called differences. I'm going back to Geoprocessing Tools and buffer. I'm going to make sure I copy out the right line. I should have mentioned earlier that the buffer distance I used to make the sidewalks wider than the roads to build that for the difference operation was 50 feet converted to degrees, and this new number I'm using is 10 feet converted to degrees. It's as if we're making these roads look 10 feet wide instead of just lines. And there it is. So this is the actual what I used in the sidewalk equity audit, was this missing sidewalks buffered out to 10 feet. I really don't think this is like the best way to do this. I'm hoping someone will tell me a better way to find a missing sidewalk map. By posting this, you can see this is actually somewhat dirty. There's a number of little specks and pieces of road around which are not clean looking. But if you're familiar with this town and you're familiar with where the sidewalks are and are not, this is pretty true to real life of where the sidewalks are in fact missing. And so the final step is you're on your layer, in the layer menu, you right click, you click export, save feature as, and I do all my work with GeoJSON, so I just select format, GeoJSON, I put in a file name, and that's it. I'm not actually going to do that now, but that was my last step, so that's it. That's how I created a missing sidewalk map for Bloomington, Indiana. Thanks.